Greetings everybody, welcome back. In this episode, I'm going to show you how I made some very special gifts for some very special people. It's a little different from what I usually do here on the channel, but it is nautical and boat related, and it was a little something interesting I thought you might be interested in. Now don't worry, I do have a lot of upcoming episodes on the other projects I'm working on, including painting the Harrisoff Eagle that I've been working on now forever, as well as 2 whirlwind trips to Cape Cod and back, hauling back a couple of boats. The first one being a Harrisoff America for a friend of mine who bought it and needs some help fixing it up. I hauled that back to Ohio, and then very shortly turned around and brought back, yes, another Harrisoff Eagle. This one's in much better shape and is only going to need a little bit of work, and we're hoping to have it ready to go in the water this spring to help out with the Wooden Boats for Veterans program I work with out in San Francisco. But more about that on the future episodes where I'll cover that in more detail. I really wish I could have stayed longer and enjoyed some of the time up there in Cape Cod. I absolutely love it up there. But at least just on the other side of the bridge getting off Cape Cod, I got to stop at one of those great clam shacks right before it was closing and got some clams and clam chowder, and oh man, you folks in New England don't know how lucky you are. Anyway, back to the particular subject of this video. I am blessed beyond belief with an amazing family, and my oldest daughter, Meryl, standing there next to me in this shot, received a full appointment to the United States Coast Guard Academy. It's kind of scary how fast time goes, but it just seems like it couldn't have been more than maybe a year or two ago that she got the phone call that changed her life and fulfilled a long-time dream. One afternoon in February, when I passed along a message that I got to have her give the Academy a call, well, I think you can judge for yourself what kind of news she got.
Thank you, I'm good.
She graduated that spring valedictorian, and soon we took her up to New London, Connecticut to start her new journey. So we took her in, got her registered, waited for her to call her name, and that was the last time we got to see her as Meryl Klein Civilian. After a little bit of screaming and yelling, we got to see her a few minutes later that day as Swab Meryl Klein. At that point, you only have about 10 minutes to give hugs and goodbyes and see how things are going. And you see those guys out there in the yard behind, they keep taking a step closer about every minute, and once they finally tighten the noose, it's time to go. They line them up and march them off for their 8 weeks of basic training.
Go left, right.
Now, aside from the amazing academic job she's done, she had some pretty amazing adventures, including being on the offshore sailing team and sailing on the Coast Guard cutter Eagle from France to the Netherlands, then to the Azores, to Bermuda, and then back to New London, sailing across the Atlantic on a tall ship. Not many people get to say they've done that. I even got to visit her while she was spending some time on the Eagle, and I have to say, getting a tour of the Coast Guard cutter Eagle from your own daughter is pretty special. Long story short, in the blink of an eye, 4 years was just about to wrap up, and pretty important things were coming up, like billet night, where she found out where she was going to be assigned after graduation.
Open your billets.
She and 2 other friends and classmates were assigned to the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Active, based out of Port Angeles, Washington. It was her first choice. She always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest, and boy, she got it. Soon after that, it was time for the big day. My wife and I really can't be prouder of our 2 amazing daughters. One of the things that these cadets and newly minted ensigns are usually pretty proud of is their class ring. In fact, officers in the Coast Guard are usually referred to as ring bangers for obvious reasons. They like to let everybody know where they went. Now, Jostens, the company that makes the rings, are more than happy to sell these cadets a ring box or any other accessories they want, but they're really kind of plain and they're really not very personal. I wanted to make Meryl a ring box and a few extras for her to give to her friends as gifts as well. I thought about a box with a lid that's personalized with their name on it, had their class crest on it, and both Meryl and I were always fascinated at these wave effects you see people doing with epoxy. So I set out to design and build some ring boxes with a really nice custom-made lid on it. As it turns out, Total Boat also makes some maker epoxy kits just exactly for this sort of thing. So I got one of their maker epoxy kits in with everything I needed to make the wave effects. But rather than trying to make the lids right off the bat, I decided to do a few practice runs at this. So I watched a few videos, did my best to recreate what they were doing, and gave it a shot. But frankly, my results just were not coming out quite right. There were some things about it that were okay, but as you can see, other things were just definitely not right. Wasn't happy with it. So I finally gave Total Boat a call and said, look, I need somebody to show me how to do this. I'm doing something wrong. And they referred me to a maker on Instagram. You can look her up at Crafts with Dre. Dre and Lucas are both makers, and Dre specializes in epoxy, and she makes the most beautiful things out of it, like the wave effect. So one evening we had a Zoom call, and she was kind and patient with me to show me everything I needed to do step by step.
If you know that it's a wave that you're going to be pouring, you want to actually, once you've completely mixed your pigment into it, I do like a little popsicle stick test. So I know that whatever this is, like surface wise, this is what it's probably going to look like once I pour it onto whatever my project is, because now that it's kind of like fallen off to the sides, I look at it and I say, okay, can I see through it? Because if I can see through it, then that means that I should probably add more pigment.
Now, aside from the amazing things that she makes and sells, she also offers classes in this sort of thing. So if you want to know how to do this right, contact her through her Instagram account, let her know you're interested, and get signed up for a class. You won't regret that you did. She is one of those people who makes it look so incredibly easy. And while it is decently straightforward, it does take some practice, and there's just no substitute for somebody having guiding you that's got the expertise to do it. And she does. I'll leave a link down in the show notes to her Instagram account. Be sure to look her up. And now it's time to get on with fabricating these lids. I started out by cutting out some square pieces of wood and then used my CNC router to carve out these pockets in there where the epoxy was going to go. After that, I masked them up with some blue painter's tape to make sure that there wasn't going to be any epoxy getting any place I didn't want it to go. That epoxy can actually go pretty deep into the grain, so if you get it on someplace you don't want it to be, it can be quite a chore and end up ruining the piece to try and sand it off of there. Next, I mixed up some of the maker epoxy. For this type of project, you'll mix up enough clear epoxy to make all the different colors that you're going to need, plus a little leftover of the clear epoxy. After that, I pour the epoxy into smaller containers and then add the pigments that I want. In this case, kind of a dark blue, a lighter blue, and then some white for the wave effect, and again leaving some clear left over. Using a popsicle stick to help it get out of a small container, you gently pour the base coat in, then adding a slightly different color behind that. Use the heat gun gently and sparingly to get all of the ripples and bubbles out of the epoxy, and to help mix the colors a little bit, especially when you're using a dark blue and a lighter blue. Now, Dre is enough of an expert in this that she can pour the entire thing and make the entire thing at once. I had some difficulty with that, so to get the wave effect the way I wanted, I first allowed the blue base coat to set. That way the white epoxy that was going to make the wave effect didn't mix with it. If you do want to do it while it's all still curing, you use some of that clear to pour across the back of the white area that you're pouring so that the epoxy doesn't mix with the blue underneath very well. Now, the procedure to make that wave effect is to pour a very, very thin line, less than you think you're going to need, and then use the heat gun to kind of push and blow it in the direction you want it to go. But the biggest thing to remember is don't overdo it. The hard part about this is when you're pushing it around with the heat gun, it's not going to look like the finished product. You have to know when to stop, not overdo it, and let the whole thing settle in and begin to cure. That's when that foaming effect takes place. It's really tempting and easy to overdo it because you don't think you're done with it. Unfortunately, by the time you get to that point, you've overdone it. But don't be afraid to give it a try. It made some really interesting and unique patterns for all of the different lids. If you're interested in trying one of these maker kits out, or any other Total Boat product for that matter, there's a discount code down in the show notes to save you a few bucks on your next order. After that, it was time to put it on the laser engraver to put the class crest on it, along with everybody's names, then some small hinges to the boxes that I made, some rare earth magnets to hold it closed, and I think they turned out pretty nice. I hope my daughter and her friends will be really happy with them. And just in the nick of time, it was time for the big day up in New London, commencement and graduation.
Harold, Grace, Klein, Marine and Environmental Sciences major, Coast Guard cutter, active.
You may now the rescue shows of all sorts of gambling.
With her mom and sister pinning on her new ensign shoulder boards, to say that we were all proud and happy for her would be an understatement. But I think I'll leave the final parting word up to President John F. Kennedy, who had the following to say once when he visited the Coast Guard cutter Eagle.
I'm not sure there are many other Americans who could climb that rigging and unfurl those sails in good times and in bad times. I think that the American people have been too long unaware of the high quality and high caliber of the cadets of the Coast Guard. And there is not anyone who has sailed any of our lakes or oceans who has not at one time or another been the beneficiary of the faithful service of the Coast Guard. This is a very ancient service in our country's history. We're proud of you and wish you many years of service in the Coast Guard and the service of our country.